There are 195 countries in the world, and there are far more spoken languages. The answers vary quite a bit, but according to the Summer Institute of Linguistics in 2009, there were 6,909 languages, which is pretty amazing and far more than I would have thought, and this makes our world a wonderfully diverse place. But what is language? What is language learning? And what is language teaching? These are the three questions I'll try and answer and give a personal definition of in this video. Scientists and philosophers have been studying language for hundreds of years, and it has been defined in a wide variety of ways. Before starting this course, I had never really thought in depth about what language actually is, but I've always been curious about how language developed. Before, I would have simply defined language as the way we communicate through a combination of words and sounds. So in that sense, other animals have their own language, as it's unique within their community. René Descartes once wrote, "There is no other animal that is perfect and fortunately situated that can put words together in a manner to convey their thoughts." So let's take whales, dolphins, and monkeys for example. They all have very distinct sounds for communication, but animals are not as versatile with their language, and what sets humans aside and separate from the animal kingdom is the ability to continuously produce and create new language, and use it in a range of contexts. Human language has also been the main reason why we have been able to dominate the animal kingdom, and it is first thought to have developed around 100,000 years ago, so people could communicate and shape the community. Henry Sweet once defined language as the expression of ideas by means of speech sounds combined into words. Words are combined into sentences, this combination answering to that of ideas into thoughts. Language interacts in every aspect of our lives, and it doesn't only consist of speech, I think. Tone of voice and accent also play a role, and not only this, but also gestures and writing. Language also has the ability to evolve, and over the years the rise of technology has heavily influenced this. Writing is a technology, and it is first thought to have begun around 5,500 years ago. And as there have been advances in technology, it has shaped the way we communicate today. Language is a fundamental part of our society and our culture, which defines us as human beings, and it is the essence of our personal identity. But this can have a negative effect, as it can make people judgmental and hold prejudiced views about where people are from, their education, or the way they speak. So, how would I personally define language? Language is a system which requires a combination of voluntary, psychological and physiological human responses which generate thought, sound, movement and symbols in order to transmit information and communicate thoughts and feelings which shape society and relationships. Okay, language learning. Language learning is an active and ongoing process which begins at birth and continues throughout our entire lifetime, and we must acquire and develop this skill in order to communicate within society, form relationships, and convey our thoughts and feelings. From birth, we develop language informally through interaction with our family, and later we begin to understand specific rules in the language through life experiences and education. If an individual then goes on to learn a second language, the learning process will benefit greatly by the prior knowledge of another language, as it will enable the learner to make connections between the two. Not only students, but teachers, parents, and the whole community is responsible for language learning. Learning takes place everywhere, starting at home, followed by society, and then schools which provide an environment for further learning with specific goals. This is where it becomes the teacher's responsibility for language development. So I would personally define language learning as a lifelong process in which an individual acquires and develops the required knowledge in order to generate the ability to use language for specific purposes of communication. I would consider language teaching associated more with second language learners, or L2 learners, and this would be done within schools in order to teach specific rules within a language, produce an environment where students could practice and then complete a test or take an exam in order to progress through the system. I'd also like to add here that I agree with the speaker of the recommended TED Talk video, that I don't believe formal exams are the best way to move forward here. At school between the ages of 11 to 16, I struggled learning my second language, which was German, and I got a D in my GCSEs for that. After that, I had no interest in learning a second language, and I also believed I couldn't do it. It's not until around after a year of living in China that I was starting to grasp parts of the local language, and this gave me motivation to go further. I didn't learn through classes and exams. I used a book to self-study, and I would practice what I learned in real-life situations. But going back, it's not just aimed at L2 learners, but at the mother tongue too. Of course, that language has to be learnt as well, but the method and the way we acquire this knowledge is different. We don't learn our mother tongue as we would an L2. Over the years, there have been a range of methods for teaching an L2, and just to name a few would include the grammar translation method, the situational approach, and the direct method. But more recently, the natural method, where language is acquired unconsciously by fluent communicative interactions. This method has become very popular, and it's the method which I not only choose to apply in my classroom, but I also found that I naturally gravitated toward this method. And this may be due to my personal experience about the way I learnt Chinese. I also use this method alongside translanguaging, as I often use their mother tongue to check understanding, or use my co-teacher, who can also explain things in more depth using their mother tongue. There are still, of course, many schools in China which don't use this approach and use some of the more traditional methods, such as learning through grammar, reading, or reciting texts. Another thing we mentioned in our small discussion is that in order for language teaching to be effective, the teacher must be willing to learn new strategies and methods to be able to deliver the content to the student effectively. So I would define language teaching as the responsibility of an educator to create an environment which will facilitate and encourage students to practice and produce language, resulting in the learner being able to use the language learned for a specific need in real-life situations or to meet certain criteria, such as an exam. Okay, that brings me to the end of my vlog. So yeah, thanks for listening.